Hi everyone. I hope everybody's doing good today. So today I want to share a little bit of my testimony again. This is something that I hadn't shared in my first testimony, but I I'm going to be really candid. I've been through a very difficult marriage. It was abusive, not physically so much as emotionally and definitely spiritually and mentally too. As a matter of fact, I think maybe even more so mentally because of all the gaslighting. Anyway, I was married to someone who he was he was very complex. He definitely had narcissistic tendencies. Um, but I also know that he was very, very deeply hurt in his life growing up. He was, pretty much deprived as a child. And, he definitely had a story. But here's the thing, we all have a story, right? But not every one of us is an abuser or a narcissist. Well, that being said, doesn't change the fact that, some people they just didn't, maybe they didn't make the right choices. He could have chose to, allow God to heal him and restore him. And well, anyway, what I want to do today mostly is not really share about him, but share about my testimony, how I got through it. I remember when I first started my relationship with God was shortly before we were married, before my husband at that time and I had decided we were getting married. I remember he was going to a church. He was, so I guess with God, and then he had decided to give his life back to God. And then when he did, I decided to give my life to the Lord too, because I wanted to start my life, on the right foot with my husband to be. Of course, the funny thing at that time was he hadn't proposed to me yet. In fact, he was still kind of thinking that he wasn't even going to be getting married again because he had been through a couple of, pretty bad relationships in the past. One pretty bad divorce, I know. Well, anyway, but I guess deep inside, I just knew that we were going to be getting married. I didn't know exactly when. I just knew I wanted to start our relationship the right way. So, I gave my life to the Lord, and he gave his life back to the Lord. And apparently, there was unfortunately some habits that he's, even giving his life back to the Lord, he didn't fully let go of those habits. And so that just ended up getting him right back into that rut that he was in before. Anyway, all that being said, I gave my life to the Lord, and I began to I began to dream. And I mean, I'm not talking about like dreams and visions, although that God has definitely spoken into me that way. But I mean dreams for my life, vision for my life, things that God spoke to my heart. And I knew that I wanted more than anything than to serve him and to love him and to live for him, just like the saints you read about in the Old Testament, or the saints you read about in excuse me, in the book of Acts. People that just eat, breathe, and sleep God, and that's what I wanted to do. And I can tell you it was challenging. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't know why you just didn't leave. But looking back now, I can see some areas where even now I'm like, well, I don't know why I didn't leave. But at that time, I knew that, my love for the Lord was so strong. I wanted to live for him so badly that and I knew that he promised me that I would be able to get through everything with him. And so I thought that that's what he wanted me to do. He just wanted me to endure and remain in that situation and just endure and just trust him to get me through it, because he said his grace is sufficient. And I can't go back and change things now. I can only say, well, this is the way it happened. But what I could do is say that God did get me through that time. It was close to 30 years. It wasn't a full 30 years. It might have been like, almost 28 years. Maybe a little bit over, because when I count how long I've known him before we actually got married. But the point is that 3 decades of my life, because shortly after we met, I gave my life to the Lord. So almost my whole time walking with God, I was with my prior husband and enduring a very, very difficult situation. And I will even be further candid. It was so bad emotionally, and mentally, and spiritually too, because there were times I questioned my faith in God, because he had become a spiritual leader, and so he taught a lot of things about God, and it caused me to question myself and whether or not I was believing God the right way, or whether I was being a liar in myself. And long story short was, I began to doubt myself severely, and but I chose to continue to believe in God, that he would get me through and he would provide for me. And the confusion was great. It really was. But again, I chose to just stand on the word of God and know that his word promises that his grace is sufficient for me and that he would get me through. And I chose to believe, in spite of the fact that there was severe gaslighting, and in spite of the fact that there was a lot of self-doubt, a lot of confusion, especially spiritually. I continued to believe, and I continued to rely on God, and I continued to beg him for deliverance. And getting back to what I was saying earlier, the guilt I felt afterward, because I was so spiritually and emotionally deprived, that I felt so imprisoned. And I wanted more than anything to be free from the marriage, but I didn't want to run. I didn't want to, although there was a few times that I did run, sort of to get a break, a breather, but I would always end up going back. That's another story. But I knew that dragging my kids through a divorce was not what I wanted to do. And coming from a family that didn't believe in divorce because they were Catholic, and so I didn't want to do that. And I just wanted free from the marriage, and I had believed that the only way to get free from the marriage was, if the marriage ended, legitimately ended. And I knew the only way that would happen is in one of us passing away, that is. And he had gotten pretty ill. He had congestive heart failure and some other medical issues, and he became really ill. And in fact, he was even told that he had a short lifespan because of it. He was given a very short time. He actually lived out longer than the time he was given. He had prayed that he would be surrounded with his family members in his passing, and he was. His prayers were answered in that regard. However, I will share with you that I wanted to be free from the marriage so bad that I remember how I just wanted the marriage to end, even if it meant his passing away. And I wanted that badly. I wouldn't come right out and say it. In fact, I would kind of cloak it in, humble, like prayers, like, oh God, please don't let him suffer. If you have to take him home, take him home. The prayers that sounded right. But deep inside the motivations of my heart, were saying otherwise. Up until the day he passed away, I dealt with that. And I'll tell you what happened. The moment he passed away, I felt relief for a moment. And then the weight of the guilt came. And that was so bad because I carried it for a good, maybe a year almost. And in that year, I got really sick. And I ended up with a health crisis to where I couldn't eat. I couldn't even get up out of bed. I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. My stomach would hurt so bad I would be writhing on the floor in pain. My ears would be stopped up. I couldn't hear right. And I was so angry and I was so guilty. And I didn't realize what I was guilty of, but I just know that I felt the shame, and the weight of the shame was so bad. And I remember when I had prayed with someone on the phone, and and she really didn't know me much. She was someone from Facebook actually, and so I was talking to her on like a YouTube, not a YouTube, like a Zoom call or something. And I remember when she was praying, and there was a few of us online in that prayer session, and she said actually it was when she was talking to me, when she was addressing me, and she said, "You're feeling really guilty right now. What are you feeling? What are you guilty about?" And I remember when I said that, just like immediately I knew, like instantaneously I knew the reason I was feeling guilty was because I said I wanted my husband to die, and he passed away because he was ill, and I wanted him to. And as soon as I said that, I just felt this immediate burden just lift off me, because in that moment I also forgave him for every hurt he ever spoke to me, everything that he ever had done or said, every lie, every time he ever gaslit me, every time we ever got into any we didn't get into very many physical altercations, but there was a couple of them, any of those times. And I forgave him for every one of those things. And immediately the guilt just lifted off me. The pain was gone. My ears, they opened up because they were like clogged and they were ringing constantly, and like my head would always feel like really congested. Well, it's like all of a sudden it just lifted up and out, and I felt lighter than I had in years. And then I was able to eat normally again. Everything just started changing for me. And I've been on this journey then. This was about 5.5, 6 years ago now. This July will be 7 years that my husband's been gone. And this has been definitely a journey for me. I've learned a lot. But one of the biggest things I've learned throughout all of this, throughout my 30-year journey, with him, and without him these last 7 years, I've learned to keep believing, to keep trusting, to keep pressing in, to keep allowing God to work in me and through me, even the times when I doubt. And there are times where you're like, God, I don't feel your presence. I don't hear your voice. I feel far away. I feel broken. Do I even belong to you? Am I even yours? The fact that you're even asking that question right there says you are his, because if you weren't, you wouldn't ask that question. You wouldn't care. So And I just wanted to encourage everyone today to keep believing and keep pressing in, keep calling on Him, because He's there for you and He loves you and His grace is sufficient for you, and He's going to get you through every trial, every temptation, everything that you'll ever go through. Okay, He's going to get you down that road and through every obstacle until the day comes where you meet Him face to face. And that joy unspeakable fills your heart and your soul. You all have a wonderful day today. I pray that you're blessed, and I will talk to everyone later. Bye.